Hey everyone, David here with your weekly Mouthful of David video. Sorry it's coming a little bit later than usual. I just had jiu-jitsu in the park with a friend. We're doing pod jiu-jitsu, so it's just me and this person training one-on-one consistently. That way, it's just two people swapping germs and not like a full class full of people's worth. So yeah, just been doing that, which has been really nice. But anyway, before I get into the video, like always, time for the podcast update. So we have dropped episode 1 of our 2-part episode about Vladimir Lenin, the Russian Revolution. So the second part should be coming out relatively soon. This past weekend, we recorded our episode about boxing heavyweight champions, where Nick, Cameron, and myself each chose a couple boxers that we thought were kind of interesting, historically speaking. And, of course, at the end of that episode, we all talked about Muhammad Ali, because, how can you not when we're talking about heavyweight boxing champions and their intersections with bigger historical things. So, be on the lookout for that. But, anyways, this week's video, it is basically looking at what drives history. Now, I did have a video earlier about different ways to look at what drives history. This specifically, though, is about violence. And this is based off of the quote from Martin Luther, which states, "Blood alone moves the wheel of history." And so, it's just part of a bigger debate of, the main driver of history, if you will. And so there's a bunch of them, some other examples are technology, class relations, ideas, the decisions that leaders make, just a whole bunch of different things. But what I basically want to do here and do with some other videos in the future is talk with just a little bit more depth about a couple different ones. And so this week's is violence. And starting off, I guess, we'll start with the obvious. It's really fair to say that violence is a big driver of history, right? There's no shortage of violence when you look at history textbooks, when you look at the past. There's wars between nations, there's wars within nations for control, civil wars basically, wars of succession, things like that. There are smaller regional wars for power, and of course, even on a smaller scale, there's always, crime, deceit, assaults, things like that. And all of this stuff added up together really does play a really big role in history. And, even though it sounds bad, and of course, violence isn't great, sometimes violence can actually, result in something better. The Civil War, the North defeating the South and ending slavery. That is a pretty cool thing. World War II, for all the complicated things that happened before and after, I would argue defeating Nazis and, the fascists of Italy and the militarists of Japan, pretty good, I'd say. So, it can even have a silver lining despite the horror that is violence. For me, though, the reason I don't think violence is the actual driver of history, personally, is based off of this question. Why is the violence happening? And I think there's a lot of different reasons, you can argue it in different ways, but my main point here really is just the fact that violence doesn't happen for no reason. There are, bad reasons it happens, poor justifications for it, people making very foolish decisions, but those decisions are at least based off some sort of reasoning. And so, for me personally, that's why I don't think violence is the driver of history, because it's not, violence for the sake of violence that's happening. Again, we look at World War II. You have these competing notions of what the world should look like, mixed with the fact that, honestly, the fascists were just constantly, invading things and basically trying to take over the world. And, I say that as someone who generally has a much more chill or nuanced take on history. It's like, nah, the fascists are comic book villains in a lot of ways. So, even then, though, right, looking at the fascists' motivations, they weren't being violent for the sake of violence. They wanted power. They wanted to blame others and constantly be aggrieved, and they wanted to have a sort of masculine hero virtue in relation to conquering the other, right? And so there's always reasons for the violence. And what you think those reasons are, people have their own interpretations. I'll be releasing videos where I give a little bit more of my interpretation of things, but again, main point is there has to be something driving underneath, what's happening kind of on the surface. So that's this week's video, kind of brief, especially because, the longer video is, the longer it takes to upload. I hope you all liked it. Have a good week, and catch you next time. Stay safe out there, y'all.